All right, everyone. Welcome to the Jay Davis Show. Super excited to have Cliff Hudson with us today. He has an amazing career that we're going to learn lot about today, but spent 25 years, right? 25
Well,
years as
I was
the CEO
CEO,
of
yeah,
Sonic.
CEO of Sonic for 23 years, COO for a couple of years before that, and 35 years with the company in total. And so I had 8, 10 years with the company before I became CEO. So I had a little bit of
It's
a
unbelievable.
learning process there. So,
Yeah, I'm sure you learned a whole lot of things. And so, Cliff also has a podcast called Master of None. Did I get that right?
yeah, you got it. You got it.
Yes. Yeah. Master of None has a book. So super excited. Thank you for coming today, Cliff.
Happy to be with you, Jay. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, why don't you give us just kind of a quick overview of kind of how you got to where you are today, some of those highlights of things you've experienced.
Okay, happy to do that. So, I my past, once I got into school, I really wasn't sure what kind of path I wanted to be on. The people that I admired when I was a teenager, as I'd look around the community and see people doing interesting things, uh, coincidentally, a local businessman that I watched what he was doing, a community leader, a politician, etc. What I saw the common denominator was with each of these people, and in 1970s, early 70s, they all happened to be men. Um, was they all had law degrees, and so as a teenager, I thought, well, okay, maybe I'll go to law school, not because I thought I want to practice a certain kind of law, but because I saw it gave people flexibility. These people were in
Yeah.
government, business, law practice, politics, et cetera. So it seemed to create some good flexibility. So what I did enjoy purposefully was the study of history before I went to law school. And I enjoyed that then. I enjoy it now. And that's my primary reading. Um, from there, I did go to law school and attended law school at Georgetown University. Had a good experience there. Washington, D.C. is a great place to go to law school because in the history and the current making of the law there of a variety of sorts. And I lived, Georgetown Law is on Capitol Hill, and it's northwest of the Capitol, and I lived east of the Capitol. So almost every day I'd go by the Supreme Court, I'd go by the Senate Office Building, I'd go by the United States Capitol, a variety of regulatory agencies. I'd often walk right by the Securities and Exchange Commission, so on and so forth. So great stuff for a 23, 4, 5-year-old thinking about alternative paths and so on. I did practice business law for 4 years after law school, and then became general counsel at the ripe age of 29. I became the general counsel of Sonic. And my view at the time was, well, what the hell? I know everything, so why shouldn't I be general counsel?
Yeah.
So
Makes sense.
that's right. That's right. Made sense then. In retrospect, it's somewhat comedic, but that's okay. So, but became general counsel at 29. And when I was, I think 31, we bought the company in a leveraged buyout transaction. None of us had any money. So we had to use the company's assets to buy the company. We put up very little equity. And even the equity we all put up, most of us borrowed it. So we bought Sonic in 1986 for $10 million. We borrowed roughly 8 million of that 10 million. And we borrowed using the company's assets. We borrowed 8 million. Then, like I said, that little piece I put in, I borrowed 2/3 of my piece, to put in. So at any rate, we bought it in 86. The turnaround, honestly, had already started taking place, 87, 88, and things began growing rapidly. A little tidbit that most people wouldn't know, and they'd be surprised to hear. We bought it in 86. And about 83, the auditors of the company had issued a going concern opinion, meaning, of course, they had questions about whether the company was going to survive. Well, 84, a new CEO came in, fiscal 84, he hired me. He kind of rebuilt the team. And and he wanted to buy the company. Well, it was a great time to buy it because when you go in concern opinion, it's kind of hard to market it, you know. So
Yeah.
we bought it, $10 million at 86. The turnaround plan that he had put in place and the team had developed was now starting to take hold. That wasn't apparent, 85, 86. In retrospect, it was quite apparent. 87, 88 really started taking off. 88, we recapitalized the company. Management that was remaining really stepped up in terms of ownership. 89, the private equity guys decided they were ready to capitalize because they really was taking off at that point. 88, 89, 90, we had double digit same store sales, but a triple digit EPS growth rate in 88, 89, 90. So now I should say EBITDA, but regardless, because we're a private company, that was more the measure. So the private equity guys decided we should go public. So we did. We filed in 90, just before Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Market went to hell. We really had to slow walk it, almost shelve it. We couldn't do that, but really slow walk it for months. And in January of 91, when the United States went into Kuwait, market came roaring back. In February, we did a roadshow. First week of March of 91, thing went public. What we had bought for $10 million 5 years later had a market value of $100 million. And I had gotten a real education. And I think one of the things I don't talk in my book Master of None, one of the things I don't talk, and I regret not talking about this, is what I had through that period was a real apprenticeship. It was serious OJT. I learned how the company made money, how it didn't make money. I learned how to sell it to people. I learned what investors of different sorts were looking for. And so after we went public, my boss, quite to my surprise, although I'd gotten a real education in corporate finance, my boss asked me to become chief financial officer, from general counsel to chief financial officer. So, and summer of 92, I became CFO. And I do talk about this in my book. I did that for a year, and then I thought, oh my God, I'm about to turn 40 years old. Oh my God, So I got to do something different. And so I went to him and I said, I'm about to turn 40 years old. Yeah. And he said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I don't know. I'm just going to go out and find out. And, I'd made some good money off the IPO, more money than I ever imagined I'd have in my life. So I thought, what the heck? I've got flexibility. I might as well give it a shot. Go ahead and see what's what. Well, instead, he said, well, why don't you just stay here and become COO and run the company? And I said, well, that sounds different, So in essence, it took me about 30 seconds to say yes, to that offer. And so in the summer of 93, I became COO, and I was started rebuilding a management team. And a year and a half into it, I had rebuilt the management team. We were going through a huge license renegotiation with our franchisees. That was a big deal, a whole lot of ways. And in the spring of 95, a year and a half after I'd been made COO, my boss surprised all of us by telling the board he was going to leave and leave the company. And he recommended to them that I become a CEO. So they asked me to leave the room. They asked him to leave the room. And they called me back in. They said, do you want to be CEO? And I said, well, I'm here. I'm already doing the job, running the company today. Rebuilt the team, renegotiated the license agreement with franchisees. So, I guess so. Why not? And so in April of 95, I became CEO, and I was CEO for the next 23 years. So that was kind of the path. But amazing. When I became CEO in 95, the system had just over 900 million in sales. And when it was bought 23 years older, we had 4.5 billion in sales. And in that period of time, that first 4 years have been public, 91 to 95, and public is worth 100 million. When I became CEO, it was worth 200 million. But we sold it 23 years later for 2.3 billion. So it had gone up in value, I should say 11 times in that 23 years. So it was a real good ride.
Good returns.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. It was good returns.
Amazing.
if you really want to compare them back to what I put in 1986 versus what I got out in 2018, they are almost bizarre returns, but they were fantastic. So can't complain, and I don't. So
Yeah.
that was the
That's
run.
amazing.
That was the run. That was the path. And of course, all kinds of wild things happening in that 23 years to build a business, build a brand, and create some pretty interesting business, but also life opportunities.
Yeah. I think that's something that people outside of the entrepreneurial world never fully understand. Because if you haven't done it, you can't fully understand that you get to an outcome like Sonic got to, and you're like, man, that must have just been all blue skies and
Right.
just
Right.
happiness and fun. And I remember talking to someone, some of our really good friends are the original guys on the Traeger team.
Yeah.
They were the part of the 5 people who went and bought it, along with Jeremy Andrus. And one of them told me, the day before we sold for $1 billion, this company that we'd bought out of bankruptcy, out of, near oblivion, it was still a dumpster fire. It was still, just things constantly going wrong, constant problems, because that's entrepreneurship. And so I think that's
Right.
a great perspective that, in 83, 84, 85, it was not probably the wisest investment from the outside.
Yeah. Well, when
And you
the
guys had to work hard to turn around.
right when the management team bought it, there were no other bidders. I mean,
Yeah.
uh,
You were the soul.
we said we'll buy the company, and there wasn't anybody else to. There was not another market. We simply had to get because we're all insiders. We had to get a small regional investment banking firm to deliver an opinion to the effect
Yeah.
that there was fair value that we paid for the company. And
It's crazy.
rear view mirror sort of way, it was great value for the company, but in terms of its potential, so we got a good deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're right about the entrepreneurship thing. People could always look at it and say, gee, you really lined it up. You really knocked it out of the park. But the fact is, this is a human endeavor, which means it's not fallible, which means people screw up. And so even with the best laid plans, stuff happens. That's not what you intended. And you're, of course, with some focus on risk management, the larger organization gets more sophisticated like that. The more you do work to try to ensure that you don't hit on fatal risks, And,
Yeah.
and I think we got better at that over time, in terms of assessing those risks and making sure we are in a good spot, But it was choppy over the years, and none of it was not a simple, straightforward path. A lot of the stuff that detail this in my book, Master of None, How a Jack of All Trades Can Still Reach the Top. I detail the fact that a lot of the things that we did that contributed to our growth, we kind of backed into, they may not even been a direct strategy of our own. That they appeared from third parties. They were brought to us by third parties. They may have even been brought to us with somebody saying, can we make sure that this doesn't, can you make sure you don't screw this up for me? And instead we said, well, how about if we take it and make sure it works for us, So anyway, which is where our ice cream program came from. So a franchisee saying, I'm doing this, will you leave me alone? And my question was, how much are your sales got from ice cream? He said, well, the best store is 30%. I said, well, my word, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want to learn what you're doing. And so we learned his program and rolled it out system wide, and it changed the business forever in a hugely positive way. Just astounding. But that was not something that we set about as our strategy. He brought that in, very entrepreneurial, been very successful with it, and his own group of stores. And his request was, would you leave me alone? So funny twist.
Going into that, and also with your book a little bit as well, I feel like just noticing that, I feel like I share this. I was telling you before we started that I feel very similar, that I'm a master, jack of all trades, master of none. But I think a lot of that, the power in that in entrepreneurship comes from a curiosity. And so just as you were saying that with your franchisee, you're like, oh, no, I want to learn more. What do you think, what part has that played in that development for you?
Well, I think it's a big part. Um, I think that an entrepreneur oftentimes, most often, is a naturally optimistic person. I read something recently
Yeah.
talking about the difference between optimism. One of the difference between optimism and pessimism is that the optimist uh, 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 sees the risks differently. The pessimist sees the risks as outweighing going forward. They may just help kind of balance things, but the pessimist sees the downside. And but what they're really doing is they're saying, I see that the risks are so great, I don't want to jump into something. The optimist, on the other hand, says, I can do this. Yeah, sure, there are risks, but that's what turns me on, man. We're gonna overcome those risks. And I think that in the entrepreneur setting, in the jack of all trades kind of concept, master of none, the entrepreneur it doesn't mind the challenges. Matter of fact, they may thrive on them, and is optimistic that they can overcome them and ultimately be successful. Otherwise, they're not going to jump into the whole endeavor. So I think this is a big place. Yes, you had to be intellectually curious, but you also have to be, I think something of a pragmatic optimist, because otherwise you don't see the upside of jumping in, you know.
Yeah.
So I think these are critical characteristics of entrepreneur.
Yeah. No, I think that's so important. I think it's also really helpful because I think often one of my opinions is that often entrepreneurship is oversold in America a little
Mm,
bit. Especially in the last 10 years, we've been telling everyone should be an entrepreneur.
mm,
But then like you said, you sometimes are missing some of those key characteristics. So you need
yeah.
to be a pragmatic optimist. And so, no, I think that's amazing. What are some of the other things that you've learned about these people who are jack of all trades? What are some of the other key learnings?
Well, I think that a person that is um, uh, curious and wants to grow and wants to seize opportunity, if they're successful at it, one of the things that they do is they keep their head up, their eyes open, meaning you can't come up with all the ideas yourself. And if you limit your enterprise just to your ideas alone, you're going to limit your enterprise growth and you're going to limit your own experience. Um, so I mentioned the example of the franchisee coming in and saying, "Will you leave me alone in the ice cream program?" And no, we're not leaving alone. We rolled it out, and now, I mean, Sonic's got to do somewhere between 500 million and a billion in ice cream sales. I don't know where it is now. I left the company 4 years ago, but it's an enormous contributor to the profitability of the company, and it certainly was back in 96, 97, 98 when we rolled it out. It changed everything because the contribution to profitability was huge. At any rate,
Yeah.
um, back to the point, what is another characteristic of the serial entrepreneur or the successful entrepreneur? My uh, pitch on that would be that a successful entrepreneur is one that then has no ego need to be the one that comes up with all the ideas. Rather, they can take someone else's idea, apply it to their own, and perhaps improve on the idea they borrowed from someone else. But more importantly, improve their own circumstance by adapting that idea. Let me give you an example of
Yeah.
this. Now, and this is an example which in 2022 sounds like a slam dunk. It's like, really, really, come on, you know? But 20 years ago, that was not the case. So what am I referring to? The fact that in 2001, that 95% of Sonic's sales came in the form of cash.
That's insane.
The payment for its business from consumers was cash, 95%. In other words, in '01, we hit 2 billion in sales. I believe that is right. In '01, we hit 2 billion sales. Yes. Uh, um, uh, I think 1.9 billion of that was cash, and 100 million was credit cards. Now, the problem was that disincentive for the customer was you pull into a parking stall, order your food. If you want to pay with a credit card, the car hop had to take the card away from you, carry it inside, run it through, bring it back. Well, okay, if that wasn't a disincentive 20 years ago, it'd be a big disincentive now. Here, let me give you your card. I'll bring it back to you in a little while, So, so what did we start experimenting with? Well, I went to a program in Chicago with CEOs, Nation's Restaurant News, wanted to do a little panel. And so what? The whole program was sponsored by Visa. And the Visa rep said, again, retrospect, slam dunk, but at the time, wasn't not necessarily intuitive. The Visa rep said, look, if you will make it easy for a customer to use a credit card, a woman leaving work will be twice as likely to stop at your shop versus a shop where it's not easy to use a credit card. And I thought, well, now, wait a minute. Now, almost 60% of our transactions come from women, which is different from the industry. And
Yeah.
if a majority of our sales come from women and they'll use us more if it's easier to use a credit card, why don't we make it easier? And how could we do that? Well, at the time, the thing that was rolling out that would be the opposite path was what we would call pay at the pump. You go to get fuel for your car, and would you go to a place, would you prefer a place that was pay at the pump or someplace where you had to put it in, go inside, pay for it, come back, or pay for it first, go back, whatever? Well, the pay at the pump was enormously convenient. So it took us a little while, and I talk about some of that in my book, but it took us a little while, but we got a test in place with the, we called it pay at your stall, PAYS. And the customers absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
And what we found immediately was when people used the credit cards, the average ticket was 40% higher. At that time, our average check was $5. When they used a credit card, the average check was $7. So we rolled that out across the system, I think, in about 18 months. And it was just an enormous contributor to growth in sales. And of course, ease for the operator because they deal with cash less. Now, I told you in 2001, 95% of our sales were cash, 1.9 billion cash and 100 million credit cards in 2001. When the company was sold in 2018, the cash portion had grown from 1.9 billion to 2 billion. The credit card portion had grown from 100 million to 2.6 billion. So the system had grown from 2 billion to 4.5 billion. 100% of the incremental growth was credit card transactions. So here's
That is
something
unbelievable.
Here's something, not my idea, not my technology. Simply went to a conference because I felt like I should. Didn't even like to go to conferences that much. It was a small deal in Chicago. I'd go up in the morning, back in the evening. And here this woman had this idea, and it just turned the light bulb on, And so I went back, actually met some resistance internally, and both within the company, within the franchise system. But eventually it was done, and the operators were like, man, this is slam dunk, So,
Yeah.
but that's, again, a deal. I didn't come up with the idea. You simply had to look at it and say, how can I use that idea to better my business? I don't have to come up with all the ideas. I can't possibly come up with all the ideas, but how can I see other ideas, maybe improve on them, or maybe just apply them to my business and improve my business, even if I don't improve on the idea, So I think that in a way, that's kind of one of the more blatant ones for the Sonic business, because not only did it make it easier for moms, which is the Visa pitch, but all the millennials coming along,
Yeah.
they, in 1990, if you said, I'm going to make a $3 charge, people would have said, what's wrong with you? You don't have any cash? What's wrong with you? 25 years later, people are doing $3 charges all over the place,
Yeah.
So anyway,
I still
so
actually remember when I did that the first time at Sonic. I
yeah,
remember I
yeah.
lived in Brazil for a couple of years, and so I
Hmm.
was out of the country, and when I came back, there's a Sonic near BYU,
Yeah.
and I remember doing it the first time. I was like,
Using
"Wow,
that.
this is
Yeah.
wild."
Yeah. Well, it's very
Cards,
convenient.
cards
Yeah.
everywhere.
Very quick, very easy. Yeah. It was a big convenience thing. Big convenience thing.
Yeah,
So,
that's awesome. I love
yeah.
that. I love that principle. So I think one of probably the most common questions, and a lot of the reason I started the podcast was because I regularly get young people, college students, people just out of college, or even friends coming to me and saying, "I want to start a business."
Mm,
Uh, and usually, kind of some of my feedback is around whether you should, whether you're fit for it. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you know that? And then B, uh, what do you tell someone who's like, I want to start something? What do I do?
yeah. Well, those are very interesting questions. My experience in business was not when it started out. And my
Yeah.
experience in business, I didn't start out as a lead executive. I backed into it over time.
Yeah.
The most fortunate thing for me, and if a person has the opportunity to do this, it probably is my number one advice. The most fortunate thing for me was that I had this opportunity for, an 8 or 10 year um, apprenticeship. And
Yeah.
so my advice to most people, uh, if you think you want to jump into something, particularly as an entrepreneur, where are you going to pick up your basic learning about, the skills necessary? Where are you going to pick that up in the first place? And it's an awful expensive entrepreneur experience to say, well, I'm going to start it with no experience and I'm just going to jump in. Well, okay. That's you know, good luck,
One.
but, yeah,
Yeah.
probably one, maybe a better answer or prodding to the entrepreneur would be, well, why don't you go find some place where you can, practice that trade for a while and see what you think about it and see where somebody's
Yeah.
doing well, see where they're screwing up. You can approach it with your own entrepreneurial eye. What would you do differently? But the big thing is learn something, learn about it and learn where that industry, whatever it is, where it's come from, where it appears to be going to, what aspects of it you want to build on. So I think the idea of the apprenticeship is huge. And anybody that's wanting to get into a ground floor business opportunity, I think my first question would be, yeah, where do you see an opportunity to get some training, before you jump out
Yeah.
on your own? So,
Yeah. I love that. I couldn't agree more. I think it's not a coincidence that most successful entrepreneurs are in their 30s, late 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s.
yeah,
I think we have this view of the Facebook founders who start in Harvard,
right.
and that is, it's not even an exception. It's like the black swan event that
Yeah,
is just so rare.
yeah.
But it's what in our culture we all think happens most of the time, and it's one in a billion. So
Well, and
I
also
love that.
we
I think
happen
that's
to
great
see
advice.
people as being overnight successes. That's virtually never true. I mean,
Yeah,
usually somebody works hard 10, 12, 15 years, then we learn about them because they build scale or they hit a new trend or whatever. We learn about them and we say overnight success. Yeah, it only took me 12 years. But
yeah,
at any rate, and from Sonic's standpoint, there were times where people would say, Sonic seems to really kind of gone through this growth spurt, which was true, but really what it went through in 2004, and particularly in the teens, is it went into into national media. And once we got
yeah,
on national media, then here we were, a 50-year-old business, and people viewing it almost as though we're a new business. Well, they're just seeing it on television for the first time in these
yeah.
newer markets. So
How
anyway,
many how many locations were there when you bought it?
when we bought the company, it was right around 1,000. I think just a little less.
Oh, okay.
Let's just say 980. It had been when this going concern thing, it had grown to by 81 or 82, it had grown to 1,300 stores, and then closed about 30% of the system. And
Wow.
the company was on a lot of leases and so on. That's when the auditors gave it a going concern. So there were 900 and something when we bought it. And when it was acquired after ICO for 23 years, we had 3,600 stores. So it had grown, 4 times
Oh
over.
my gosh.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Well, and more importantly, the
Well,
system-wide sales had grown from when we bought it. The system-wide sales were like 300 million. And when we sold it, it was 4.5 billion. So that was the big transition to total brand size.
that's
Anyway,
unbelievable.
yeah.
One of the other things you mentioned that I'd love for you to expound upon, you mentioned before we started that you think a lot of times we feel guilt about being a jack of all trades. I completely agree. That resonated with me immediately. Can you expound on that and kind of tell the listeners what you've learned about that over time? Because I think that is, we are very often pushed to being a specialist. And I think there's even some challenge because we do need to specialize. We do need to learn our trade a bit and have that apprentice time. But then at some point we have to kind of generalize again. Can you kind of explain that process for you?
Well, I think you just did a pretty good job. Uh, I think
Just
the
picking
special,
up what you said.
yeah, I think in a given area, whether it's medicine, law, uh, finance, whatever, it does take a while to develop some expertise. There is a push, and I think too much of a push in our side to specialize. Maybe we're backing off that now, but there has been for a long time a push to specialize in the whole thing. What are you going to be when you grow up? Maybe people should have said, what series of life experiences would you like to have that you think would be enriching
Yeah.
for you, and you can say, okay, well, I'd like to do these 5 things, but and maybe in sequential order, maybe overlapping. But the fact is, we historically haven't thought that way. I think that uh, the idea, first of all, as a younger person, the pressure you can feel in college, coming out of college, et cetera. It's not just specializing. I think you can have the mistaken notion that you ought to have defined where you want to end up. And my reaction to that would be stop doing that, you know, because
Yeah.
because life is a journey, and the last thing in the world is possible, much less even desirable, is to want to design where you're going to be at the finish line, which
Yeah.
that's a bit of a joke to think you can do that, But the fact is, a journey, and you want to take that journey, and you want to be open to all the great things that can happen in life. So I think what you do, a younger person can make the mistake of believing they have to know the path they're going to be on. The path's going to open itself before you. So your best job, your best approach to that job is simply to prepare well. And whatever that means, if accounting interests you, then study accounting. If finance interests you, study finance, marketing, so on and so forth. And if playing the guitar and singing, interests you like nothing else in the world, then get on it, but put yourself into it. Now, anyway, so so preparation, I think, is important, but them remaining open. And if something clicks for them like nothing else, and they know they want to be a brain surgeon, and that's just what they're going to do, then go for it. But I do think there are a lot of people out in the world, quite apparently like you and like me, that had a variety of interests, enjoyed music, enjoyed history, enjoyed politics, enjoyed travel, enjoyed, so on and so forth. And it's like, well, then do all those things, one degree or another. I had the
Yeah.
fortunate opportunity of an apprenticeship, learning a business. I didn't open the opportunity to buy the company, but I was part of the group that did buy it. And I bought a very small piece of it. I did recognize opportunity over time and seize it and grow it. But the fact is, I got a lot of training. And then one day, to my utter surprise, my boss said, I'm leaving. Told the board that he didn't, I got no forewarning of it. And lo and behold, the board says, you want to run the company. So you can't make that happen, you know? So
Yeah.
I prepared, and I think I prepared well, and then had a very interesting career running the company. But life's a journey. You got to be open to the variations that it does present, and that's what makes life interesting. So nobody should put pressure on themselves to say, I need to define that path. I need to have an understanding of the path today and have it defined, or somehow I'm a failure. And it's like, let go of that, get rid of that. Don't think that way.
Yeah.
So,
Man, I couldn't agree more. I think that's such a great point that I'm gonna take from this is stop trying to design the end from the beginning.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's the point of the journey.
yeah. That's the point of the journey.
And I
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I fall into that trap.
It's an illusion to think you can possibly do that anyway. Too many variables presented along the way.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, any other kind of final words of wisdom? Any calls to action? Obviously, people should go and buy the book. I bought it today. I'm super excited to read it.
Well, you took the words
So,
right out
yeah.
of my mouth. The call to action is buy the book, master of
Yeah.
none, how a jack of all trades can still reach the top. I do talk about a number of other experiences, life experiences, but also within Sonic and my time running the company. Some humorous, some not. But I think it'll give people a sense of uh, uh, how life happens in that way, and don't put too much pressure on yourself that you've got to know it all and predict it all. Be open to change, and work hard, stay open, and keep your head up. And interesting things can happen, and they will happen. So
Yeah.
that'd be my pitch.
I love it. I love it. I love when you said head up, eyes open. I
There
think
you
that's
go. There you
a
go.
great visual for how we should approach life. And as an entrepreneur, that's been my experience in my shorter period of time is so often what we plan, you back into stuff and you're like, I don't even know how we got here, but yeah, it
Right.
ended up being the right thing. And you kind of
Right.
just need to be that flexibility is so crucial. So
Well, it is funny
it's
because
amazing.
so many over the years, so many people give the advice: keep your head down. And depending on the circumstance, that you're on a battlefield, that's probably not a bad idea. But by and large,
Yeah.
in life, I think you're better off with your head up and your eyes open, your ears open. Open to all possibilities.
Yeah.
You'll miss the opportunities otherwise.
Yeah. That's unbelievable. Well, I love it. Well, thank you again for taking the time today and spending time with us and sharing your wisdom and experiences. A bunch of notes that I'm walking away with. So
Good.
super
Happy to do
excited.
so. Yeah, happy to do so, Jay. And I appreciate the time and opportunity to visit as well. And be interested to hear any other feedback you have on the book.
Love it. Well, thank you again, Cliff, and everyone go buy Cliff's book. Super excited to get it and check it out. Thank you again.
Very good. Take care, Jay.
Thanks.